Welcome, folks. Welcome to the 87th episode of the Spun Today Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and this is a free writing session episode. In this episode, I share a writing tip that I picked up and then read and reflect on some of my free writing, which is located at spuntoday.com/free writing, in case you guys want to take a look at your leisure and read some stuff yourself. Like I told you guys last time that I recorded one of these writing session episodes. I listen to a lot of different writing podcasts, watch documentaries about writing and creativity like David McCullough's Painting with Words, or read books like On Writing by Stephen King or Bird by Anne Lamott. And point being that if I hear something that resonates with me, or tips that I pick up, or a bunch of the different writers that I follow on Twitter and online, and interviews that I read and stuff like that, I'm going to share them with you guys, at least one per free writing episode, as long as I have one. This specific tip I shared in one of my newsletters some time ago, but I wanted to share it here on the podcast in case you don't subscribe to that. And I'm not positive if I mentioned it before or not on the podcast. Maybe I have, but just in case, here it goes. Joanna Penn is an accomplished writer. She writes both fiction and nonfiction. She has I think a dozen nonfiction books out, and probably the same amount of fiction novels. She does it full time, and to the point where she was able to retire from her day job, as well as her husband retired from his day job to help her run the whole writing business, a small little empire that she's built for herself. She also has a successful podcast called the Creative Penn Podcast. Penn spelled like her last name, Penn, and she interviews a lot of writers and creatives on there. From one of these interviews, she interviewed Jeff Goins, and who was quoting another writer. And this is the tip that I wanted to share with you guys that resonated with me. And he says something to the effect of that when you sit down to write, spend it all. Don't save anything for later. And I'll tell you guys why it resonated with me. We're all a collection of different experiences and ideas and stuff like that, right? So something like this might resonate more with me than let's say than with some of you guys, just based on what I correlate this type of thing to in my head. So obviously it has to do with writing, but also it, for me, when I heard it kind of co-signed an idea that I've heard within the stand-up comedy community when it comes to writing jokes. And they have something called Kill Your Darlings. I've heard it referred to, but basically what it means is that when you, if I'm not mistaken, in the stand-up comedy community, when you have a joke that has already been on a special, or that it's an older joke, but it works, don't get into the habit of just performing that same material. You have to kill it off and move on, and you will create more new jokes and material. And also within a set, if you write a set and you're building up to the closer, which is theoretically the joke that's gonna land the most and get the most laughs, you're building up to that moment like a crescendo. But if you set up your set that way and then go back and make, for example, this is very theoretical, I don't do stand-up comedy or anything like that, obviously, but from what I've heard and listened to other comics speak about, because again, I'm into their creative process and their writing process specifically, you can also take the approach of starting with your closer, so that when you write out and work out a set after months and years, or however long it takes you, and weeks and months rather, you kill off all the other stuff that led up to the closer, start with the closer, and theoretically build up your set to crescendo to another closer. So it should be like that much stronger. You know what I mean? So that concept kind of, at least in my head, related to this tip, which again is, when you sit to write, spend it all, don't save anything for later. I personally have done this with writing like short stories or anything really, where I like jot down an idea or like a name for a character or like a few lines of dialogue, and I'm like hoarding it. I'm like, oh, this is a good idea for a story about X, or this is like a great character name that could, be in his own novel, the protagonist in his own novel, like once upon a time, one day. And it's like, then I'll like go back to like a notebook and I'll read this like random line of dialogue or character name or whatever, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't even remember anymore. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, I was like hoarding it to save it for some time that doesn't exist or won't exist. And then I took this tip, this idea, like after hearing it, and kind of went into writing with that mentality of not saving things, just let it all out, spend it all, quote unquote. And for me, at least, it's been like a bit more freeing and a bit more. I don't feel like I'm leaving anything out or like losing anything. I'm like catching, quote unquote, more ideas with the idea net instead of letting them float away or whatever. So yeah, I wanted to share that with you fine folks, and hopefully that helps some of you writers out there. Now, for the free writing portion of this episode, for any new listeners out there, what I do with these free writing session episodes is read some of my free writing that I've written over like past years. It could be a couple weeks old, it could be a few years old, that I recently dug up and put on my website, spuntoday.com/free writing. And the point of it, at least for me, is just to kind of like track my creative process and just like look back on shit that I was thinking a couple years ago and reflect on it, see if I still agree, disagree, and pretty much just share with you folks. So if you're not into writing or seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak, then probably wouldn't be your thing. You'd probably be like, what the fuck is this boring random shit? And lastly, free writing is pretty much stream of consciousness writing, where you put a pen to paper and just write anything and everything that comes to mind. And for me, it's like a cathartic type of, therapeutic type of thing. You get a lot of ideas out that way, a lot of good ideas, but at the same time, it's, stream of consciousness, so you also get a lot of shit in there mixed in also. So it's kind of like a diamond in the rough type of thing. And the practice I definitely recommend for anybody that's into any creative type of endeavors, and especially writing. Anyways, here we go, folks. For those of you that know the drill, it's at spuntoday.com/free writing. And I'm going to be sharing 3 different posts today, all of which were written in 2015. And I'll give you the exact dates later after reading them, but they're posted on the site on November 26th, 2017. The first one is titled, "Don't Wait for Inspiration to Strike." And I wrote, "Don't wait for inspiration to strike. The bolt of inspiration is everlastingly within you. You feeling inspired when it happens to seep out is just a mechanism of resistance. It rations out a little inspiration here and there so that you think that's what you need to feel in order to progress and move forward. Summon your own inspiration. Don't wait on it to happen to you." I wrote that on Tuesday, July 28th, 2015 at 12:31 a.m. Now, this is definitely easier said than done. I've been going through some shitty writer's block. So I'm not even taking my own advice, but again, like I said, easier said than done. But I've been going through some shitty writer's block for the past couple months, I would say. I've never been, or haven't been yet, a prolific writer. My peak in terms of days that I write would be probably 40 to 60% of the days in a month. For the past couple months, just mixed, for pretty much reasons of not prioritizing it. I've been floating around like the 15% to 30% range of days in a month that I actually like write something. So it's definitely a motherfucker, and it's definitely not as easy as, hey, inspiration, come out, I want to write something. But a takeaway that I get from this now is that, because I also speak to people that like want to write or like want to do something creative, want to paint, want to like whatever they're into. And it's always, not always, but some stories that I hear are things along the lines of, yeah, my kids, and by the time I put them to sleep, and, you know, then it's 9 o'clock, and then I won't watch the show, and then, you know, the day passes by, et cetera, et cetera. And I have days like that too, you know, minus the kids part because I don't have any yet. But, you know, I have days, you know, that's all resistance, right? The concept of resistance, but from Stephen Pressfield, which is, you know, anything and everything that gets in the way of writing is a form of resistance, whether it's something serious or something innocuous. Work, for example, like my day job is a form of resistance, or your day job is a form of resistance, but it's something that has to be done because, you know, not making any money doing anything else. But it's also a form of resistance would be just like sheer laziness, or you know, wanting to watch a movie that just came on Netflix or something like that. Like that's a form of resistance also, and you have to combat that best you can by forcing yourself or devising mechanisms for yourself where you like block out certain times in the day to sit down just in front of your computer and force yourself basically to write. And but anyway, going back to what I was about to say, which was that some people say, oh, you know, I just don't feel inspired to write, or I only write when I feel inspired. That specifically, I know is a mistake, because you know, that feeling of inspiration is like, oh my God, I want to go do something. That's something that's fleeting. And that's something that I've found that when I have overcome like the resistance of, you know, thinking that I have to wait to be inspired in order to write. And I've just been like, you know, fuck it, let me just sit down and see what happens, see what comes out. And I've gotten some good shit, good free writing pieces, good short story ideas, you know, written actual short stories, like under those conditions of, nah, I don't feel like doing shit today. But I like push myself to, and like break past that laziness, that resistance, that writer's block, whatever you want to call it. And it works. So I definitely always like mention to anyone that has told me stuff like that, you know, to attempt that, to not wait for that like inspirational spark. So in that sense, I agree with the whole, you know, summon your own inspiration, although it doesn't have to be like that feeling of being inspired. It's basically substitute that inspiration with just putting your head down and doing the work. I do like that line there that says it rations, and by it I mean resistance, rations out a little inspiration here and there so that you think that's what you need, in order so that you think that's what you need to feel in order to progress and move forward. Because it's kind of like a drug dealer or something, like giving you a little taste to get you hooked. So it's kind of like a diabolical way that resistance is like, oh yeah, look, this feeling of inspiration, this is what you need to write, and I'm only going to give it to you once every 6 months so that you don't fucking do anything. So I like that line there, that concept. And yeah, it's pretty much it. It was a little short piece. Didn't get much else from it. Alrighty, on to the next one. Alright, the next one up, also posted on the same day, November 26th, 2017, is titled Writer's Block or Lazy, which kind of ties into the one that we just went over. And that was not on purpose. Alright, I wrote, I'm having one of those days that a writer goes through. Don't want to write. Not for me, not for you. It's not writer's block per se. More like being lazy inside. Pushing through it by forcing the pen to the page. Not expecting jewels tonight though. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Is it settling? Lowering my own expectations? Or is it knowing myself enough to know when the outcome would be dog shit? Conversely, is it vain to think that when the mood is right, jewels will just pour out of this pen like a bejeweled screen on a smartphone? Nah, that's exactly where the expectations of myself should be. Why ever settle for expecting any less than greatness? Just earn it and work through all the up and down phases between now and then. And I wrote that on Sunday, August 16th, my mother's birthday, 2015, at 8:46 p.m. All right, so looking back on this, I think there's something there. I mean, something that ties into the concepts we went over in the last piece, which have to do with writer's block and pretty like that line that says pushing through it by forcing the pen to the page. Obviously, I literally wrote that specific piece I just read to you guys while I didn't want to write, so I pushed through it in that sense. Nothing too impressive, nothing impressive at all actually in this piece, or anything that stands out like glaringly to me right now. But looking at it objectively as just an exercise, writing or any creative pursuit is like a muscle. And this was, just doing curls, putting reps in at the gym, the writing gym. I'm not crazy about like the hubris and like that second paragraph there where I speak about like the inherent thought or assumption that if I was in the mood, I would be writing like the greatest shit ever, the next great American novel or something like that. Like, I don't like that type of personality in myself or in others. But at the same time, I think it's important to strive for and expect greatness from yourself. Like, expect good quality shit out of yourself. Be your own worst critic. But check yourself if you're going a little bit off the rails and, drinking your own Kool-Aid. I think that's a good way to keep things measured and balanced. And if you don't want to be the best at something on some level, or at least your best self, then you might be doing it for the wrong reasons. So absolutely root for yourself, push yourself, be hard on yourself, not too hard. But at the same time, don't think that you're the best thing since sliced bread, especially if you write the way I do. Alrighty, and last but not least, the next post and last one for today and for this episode is also posted on November 26th, 2017, and the title is The Burden of Betterment. And I wrote, there's something freeing about realizing that you're alone. Not in a lonely sense, but in being uniquely you. We all have this freedom, but oftentimes choose to imprison ourselves within the mental jails of assimilation, confining ourselves to mediocrity, afraid of becoming more than we thought we could ever be. What we ought to realize is that the burden of betterment is on each and every one of us, especially those that are not yet willing to own what's theirs and theirs alone. Collectively, we're in this together, which may cause hesitation to your input in not knowing how and if it will be received, and that can be discouraging to say the least. Try to manifest the courage to actualize what you have to offer. Set it free of your self-imposed shackles and allow it to spark freedom in others. And I wrote that on Saturday, November 14th, 2015 at 4:44 p.m. Shout out to Jay-Z. All right, so there's some kumbaya hippie dippiness to this piece, which you guys know it's a love-hate thing with me when it comes to stuff like that. I definitely lean that way, and then when I'm writing, and then when I read it back, it kind of like stands out to me like as annoying. So hopefully it doesn't come off that annoying to you guys. But at the same time, like, I do believe that. Like, I do believe and feel that, as a society, like, we're all in this together, and let's make the world a more positive, progressive place and lift each other up, etc., etc. Like that type of shit. While at the same time balancing it with the reality of there being pieces of shit out there and people that just don't give a fuck about stuff like that. What I do like is some of the, I guess you could call it like the wordplay. Wouldn't really be wordplay, right? But the way certain lines are written. For example, we all have the freedom, but oftentimes choose to imprison ourselves within the mental jails of assimilation. And that's just speaking to my own experiences and definitely the experiences of some of you. Definitely, absolutely, some of the experiences of myself when I was younger, where we want to fit in, or I guess it's kind of like a tribal type of mentality of wanting to be accepted by a group of friends or people or whatever, and we try not to stand out, we make a conscious effort to not stand out or not be ourselves too much because we want to be, accepted or like kind of like under the radar or whatever. And we do that, on and off. I do that on and off, still. But at the same time, it's like self-imposed shit that we put on ourselves that we're like in our own heads about. And when someone is themselves, or when I'm myself completely, or, free about, what I'm into or whatever, it's like a noticeable difference. And like, I personally gravitate more towards people like that you can tell aren't like putting up a front or having their like guards up. And it's not necessarily like a bad thing. I mean, you can't just go to the street, doing whatever you want, whenever you want. There's a time and place for things. But just that general sense of, being you and being okay with being you is, I think, the reason why you feel most comfortable around like the people that you're closest with, like family and close friends and your spouse, etc. And that's what I think that line is speaking most to. There's something else, another one that I liked in here. Okay, the last line where I wrote, try to manifest the courage to actualize what you have to say, what you have to offer. Well, that's, again, something else that's like easier said than done. It's like, how do you actually manifest the courage to actualize what you have to offer? And how do you figure out what it is that you have to offer? Like maybe nobody wants whatever the fuck you're offering, but going through the motions, going through the process of offering what it is that you have to offer, like me, for example, with this podcast or writing in general, is kind of something that's like, if somebody gets benefit from it, that would be great. That would be definitely a very close second to the purpose of putting things out there, of doing a podcast, of writing in general, for me. But number one, it's for me, like I want to do it, like I have a passion to do it. I enjoy doing it. It's cathartic for me. It's therapeutic for me. I find shit out about myself by doing it and about other people. But how do you actually like manifest the courage to do certain things? I don't know. You just gotta kind of like man up, push through, I guess. And I guess like when you really want to do something, because for example, I'm not into being too much of like a people person or anything like that. So if you told me, a couple years ago that I would be doing a podcast and writing and putting myself out there like that, I'd be like, yeah, right. But actually, I wanted to do it so much that I got past that type of shit. And but the line that I like most from here, that I was about to say, was like that last part of setting yourself free, not just for yourself, but to allow it to spark freedom in others. Because just from you being open, like it'll have like a ripple effect and touch other people and allow them to be like, oh, you know what, let me do my own shit, similar to that. That's how I got into podcasting, just from listening to other podcasts and writers and stuff like that. And Welcome, folks. Welcome to the 87th episode of the Spun Today Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and this is a free writing session episode. In this episode, I share a writing tip that I picked up and then read and reflect on some of my free writing, which is located at spuntoday.com/free writing, in case you guys want to take a look at your leisure and read some stuff yourself. Like I told you guys last time that I recorded one of these writing session episodes, I listen to a lot of different writing podcasts, watch documentaries about writing and creativity like David McCullough's Painting with Words, or read books like On Writing by Stephen King or Bird by Anne Lamott. And point being that if I hear something that resonates with me, or tips that I pick up, or a bunch of the different writers that I follow on Twitter and online, and interviews that I read and stuff like that, I'm going to share them with you guys, at least one per free writing episode, as long as I have one. This specific tip I shared in one of my newsletters some time ago, but I wanted to share it here on the podcast in case you don't subscribe to that. And I'm not positive if I mentioned it before or not on the podcast. Maybe I have, but just in case, here it goes. Joanna Penn is an accomplished writer. She writes both fiction and nonfiction. She has I think a dozen nonfiction books out, and probably the same amount of fiction novels. She does it full time, and to the point where she was able to retire from her day job, as well as her husband retired from his day job to help her run the whole writing business, a small little empire that she's built for herself. She also has a successful podcast called the Creative Penn Podcast. Penn spelled like her last name, Penn. And she interviews a lot of writers and creatives on there. From one of these interviews, she interviewed Jeff Goins, and who was quoting another writer. And this is the tip that I wanted to share with you guys that resonated with me. And he says something to the effect of that when you sit down to write, spend it all. Don't save anything for later. And I'll tell you guys why it resonated with me. We're all a collection of different experiences and ideas and stuff like that, right? So something like this might resonate more with me than let's say than with some of you guys, just based on what I correlate this type of thing to in my head. So obviously it has to do with writing, but also it, for me, when I heard it kind of co-signed an idea that I've heard within the stand-up comedy community when it comes to writing jokes. And they have something called Kill Your Darlings. I've heard it referred to, but basically what it means is that when you, if I'm not mistaken, in the stand-up comedy community, when you have a joke that has already been on a special, or that it's an older joke, but it works, or just click on the affiliate links tab at the top center of the page, and there you will see a banner for Amazon. You literally just click on that, and it takes you to Amazon's website, where you do your shopping like you normally do. It does not cost you anything extra, but Amazon will give me a kickback just for driving traffic to their website. So that would be a big help. It literally costs you nothing extra financially, just costs you a couple of extra clicks of your mouse before you do your Amazon shopping. The iTunes banner that's on that same page works the same way. So if you're purchasing music or movies or whatever it is on iTunes, feel free to go through my affiliate link portal there as well. If you want to make a one-time PayPal donation, feel free to do so. There's a PayPal donation button on there as well. Within that same tab, you'll also find a link to the Spun Today Viral Style store. Now, the Viral Style store is a store where you can get Spun Today merch, whether it's a coffee mug or a t-shirt that I personally designed. And spoiler alert, I'm no Ralph Lauren or whoever designs Gucci stuff. But I did create the design of those shirts myself. I have a couple t-shirts on there. One that says, for example, Write Need Every Day, which is a play off of Snoop, Dre, and Nate Dogg's Smoke weed every day. So it's right need every day, with like a puff cloud of smoke behind it. I have a podcast versus everybody t-shirt and just stuff like that. So check it out. The link to the Viral Style store is also there. You can also help support the podcast on a reoccurring basis if you become a Patreon supporter. Now, Patreon is pretty cool, and there's a little video explanation of what it is and how it works, but I'll try to do my best to summarize it here. Basically, you sign on to Patreon, which is a free service, free account, and you can support not just myself, but any other podcasters or creatives that also have Patreon pages. And you can choose to, for example, donate $1 to them on a per episode basis. So the Spun Today Podcast has 2 episodes a month. So if you donate $1 to it, it'll be $2 a month, basically. And you set it up, and it just happens automatically on a reoccurring basis. There are 0 fees. You can cancel at any time. No hassle, no bullshit. And it's a cool way to help support, and is much appreciated. And also, it's not just like for example, a PayPal donation, which is just that, but through Patreon, it allows the creator, in this case being myself, to set up a reward system, if you will. So if you donate $1 per episode, you are considered a tier 1 supporter. If you donate $3 per episode, you are a second tier supporter, etc., etc. And it goes up to 4 tiers, and each tier gets different things. Like tier 1 gets a free Spun Today bookmark and a shout out on the podcast. Tier 3 gets those 2 things from tier 1, as well as a free writing piece that's not posted on my website or available to anyone else, etc., etc. So check that out if you will. And visit my Patreon page at Patreon, patreon.com/Spun Today. Another great, amazing way to help support the podcast is to rate and review it. This costs you absolutely nothing. Whether you listen on iTunes, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on iHeartRadio, on Pocket Casts, on Overcast, on Player FM, on Google Play, on YouTube, on Tumblr, or if you listen on Podbay or any other of your favorite podcast apps. Please rate and review the episode. It really is the number one way to help the show gain traction, gain exposure. You know, you could also share it with friends and family and tell them, check out what this idiot is saying. Some of it is actually pretty good. Or it all fucking sucks and you should listen and laugh. But as long as you're listening, it would be much appreciated. So rate and review the podcast wherever it is that you listen. Follow me on Twitter or on Instagram at Spun Today. Like the Facebook fan page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Subscribe to my YouTube page as well. All podcast episodes are available on YouTube, as well as clipped versions. For example, with the Random Rant episodes, I speak about a bunch of different topics instead of having the full episode alone, which is also available on YouTube. But you also have snippets of the different topics broken up into more digestible chunks. So check that out. You can also support by checking out my book, Make Way for You, Tips for Getting Out of Your Own Way. It's a quick, short read if you're looking for some inspiration and motivation, and you can find out more about it at spuntoday.com/books. There you'll find a video of me telling you all how the book came to fruition, as well as a couple of audio excerpts. If you're interested, you can purchase it wherever books are sold: Kindle, iBooks, Kobo, in an ebook or paperback format, which you can find on Amazon. Also, for being a Spun Today listener, I can also send you a free copy. Right there on that same landing page at spuntoday.com/books. Drop in your email address at the bottom of the page, and I'll shoot you over a copy in the format of your choice. And that's all I got, folks. Thanks again for checking out this episode. And as always, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening.